Jose Quintana has a stress fracture in his rib cage, which could keep him out for large portions of the upcoming season. What does this mean for the Mets rotation? Well, it appears like David Peterson is set to take a much bigger role. I'm going to preview his season as well as that of Tylor Megill on today's show, as the Mets rotation depth just got a little bit thinner.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, Jose Quintana is out and could be out for a long time. Has a fracture in his rib cage. This is similar to the injury that Chris Sale had last year, where he got hurt in February, did not start rehab until June. We really don't know here, because essentially what happens is he needs to rest for 6 to 8 weeks. Then they reassess and decide what he can start doing. Now, he might be able to get back to some physical activity then, but at that point, you still don't know if he can start throwing. He's going to have to build himself up from nothing. I mean, the Mets signed a pitcher to a 2-year deal that now you don't even know how much contributions you're going to get from Quintana at all this year. It's not to say that he's out for the season, but out for the first half appears like it could be a likely scenario the Mets have to come to terms with. And what that does is it just knock down your rotation a peg. You went out and you signed 3 starters to replace 3 starters because you like the idea of having David Peterson, Tylor Megill, Joey Lucchesi as rotation depth. Now, one of them, likely Peterson, has to fill in for Quintana, and that's really just putting you in a bad spot heading into the year, because now you have less flexibility if another guy goes down. While you could say, oh, what a waste for signing Quintana, here he's out, not to say that because he goes down, other pitchers don't, but sometimes that's just the math of it. Like, somebody had to go down, and the reason that you go into camp with this many starters is because you know that even though David Peterson is number 6 on the depth chart, he's likely going to still make 20 starts this year, and he really earned that. You know, if you look at what he did last year, he did make 19 starts, pitched in 28 games, 105 and 2/3 innings pitched, and he pitched to a 3.83 ERA coming off a year prior where he pitched to a 5.54 ERA. A former first-round pick that had success in the shortened season, and then when you actually pitch in front of fans in 2021 and the league had time to adjust to him in 15 starts, he just wasn't as effective. He did strike out more batters, but he gave up more home runs, and he really let his walks get to him more. You look at his left-on-base percentage in his rookie season, 76.8%. Left on base percentage, 2021, 65.4%. So a lot of those base runners that he had on were coming back to haunt him in a way that they didn't last year, similar to how they didn't in 2020. A big difference is he was dynamic with the slider last year, and that's why I've been so high on David Peterson. I did a show earlier this offseason where I said David Peterson could be a 3. I still believe that. I still believe that David Peterson, you know, on a team that doesn't have Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and now Kodai Senga, I think he could ascend to be that guy. I really do, on a good team, because there's not just a ton of lefties in baseball that are striking out nearly 11 batters per 9 that have a slider that had a whiff percentage of 47.9. That means that nearly half the time a batter attempted to swing at that slider, they were coming up empty. I mean, that is a dynamic offering, and his fastball is really starting to play up well. The velo is ticking up on it. Last year it averaged at 93.7 miles per hour. He gets great extension coming from his frame, and from the left side, that fastball can jump on hitters a bit, especially when you compare it to what he's throwing with his primary offerings beyond that being the slider and the changeup. So that allows that fastball to jump more, particularly because he throws it up in the zone. At one point, in 2020, maybe we thought that he was better off leaning into being a sinker ball pitcher and getting ground balls. Now, he's a strikeout guy. He can go out and strike out batters with the best of them, and that has led to the results he had last season. And it puts him in a position now where I look at David Peterson and I think, all right, this Mets rotation didn't get worse losing Quintana, in the sense that I believe Peterson can go up and put up a season very similar to what you were expecting from Quintana. Now, it got worse in the sense that David Peterson was supposed to be the guy that fills in if there were any injuries that take place. Now that's Tylor Megill. So I think there's a step down there, and your overall depth took a big hit, obviously, because you go from being, 8 deep of guys you trust, with maybe Jose Butto or Elizar Hernandez being the ninth, to now you got your 5-man rotation of Verlander, Scherzer, Senga, Carrasco, Peterson, with McGill and Lucchesi, and then you go to Butto or Hernandez. So you just lose an arm there. And if you were to get to a point this season where Verlander had a pulled hammy and he's out for 2 weeks, now McGill's got to step in. But oh wait, Carlos Carrasco's dealing with a little bit of dead arm and he needs to be set aside. Well, now all of a sudden you got a rotation where it's Scherzer, it's Senga, it's Peterson as the 3 with McGill and Lucchesi. Suddenly that rotation looks a lot less potent. But for right now, I actually think the Mets are okay. I think they were able to sustain an injury to this rotation, and even 2 if they really had to, assuming it was from the back end, or even if you could keep Scherzer and Verlander upright, I feel like you're fine with whatever 3 guys you can put behind them. If you lose one of those top 2, that's where this hurts a little bit more, because suddenly with everyone having to get up one in the pecking order, you're just getting down to the wire where suddenly a rotation that includes McGill and Lucchesi at some point, that's where you'd be a little more concerned. Right now, I think they're fine. I still think, as we're going to preview Peterson's projections next here, he is going to be able to go out and be a very, very competent starting pitcher for this team. And it's just a matter of making sure the rest of the guys can stay healthy, which in Major League Baseball is never a given. We're going to get to all that in a minute, though. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We are past the midway point of the NBA season, which makes now the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because there, customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when they sign up. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to 3-point strain. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. I have my eye on MLB futures right now, and Brett Beatty at plus 1,300 for Rookie of the Year started to look pretty good to me. Also, Kodai Senga. Last I checked, he's at plus 850 now to win Rookie of the Year. Hey, the Mets might have their first Rookie of the Year since 2014. Actually, 2019. I've done that before on the show. Why do I forget that Pete Alonso won the Rookie of the Year? I don't know. It's crazy that I do that, but hey, the Mets have had some success with that award in the past, with DeGrom in 14, with Alonso in 19, and this year could be the year for Beatty or Senga, so don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's take a look at David Peterson's projections for the 2023 season. If you go to Fangraphs, as I've been mentioning a lot as we do our season previews here, you can find the projection models on each player in the green. So when we look at this green blurb here, we can see some projection models that factor in depth chart and others that do not. For Peterson, these models should change if they can accommodate the Quintana injury, because now he should be in the rotation more. Previously, there was only one model, and this is the one that does not factor in depth chart, Zips, that had him pitching over 100 innings. Now I think that changes significantly. So let's instead focus in on the strikeout per nine, the walk per nine, the home run per nine, the ERA, all these other stats, and try to get a gauge of what projection models feel for Peterson this year. So we start with ERA. They have him between 3.21 and 4.08. Steamer is the one that has him at 3.21. You then look at FanGraphs depth chart, ATC, the bat. All of them are in the 3.6 range, between 3.63 and 3.64. The ZiPS depth chart has him at 4.8. So there is a little bit of a variance here, but that is maybe because you have a pitcher that hasn't really done it for a long time. He could be the 2021 guy, and maybe that's where he gets the ERA closer to the 4.08. I will acknowledge, though, that that is only slightly worse than what he did last year at 3.83. And then you look at a lot of the models that have him slightly better. Then there's the one outliner of Steamer that has him going up and pitching to a 3.21 ERA, which I actually think is a very viable outcome. If David Peterson, is able to limit the walks a little bit compared to last year, that's the big change that he makes. I really think you're going to have less runners on base that can come around to score on the single, and that's going to allow him to be able to pitch around the hits that he gives up better. And with the strikeouts and being able to maybe set down 10 to 11 per 9 again, David Peterson's a weapon out of that rotation. I really feel that to be the case. You look at the strikeout projections, they have him between 9.79 and 10.21, so no one has him striking out as many as last year, but they all have him striking close to double digits. That is a big, big number for a left-handed pitcher, and they have the walks actually coming down. It's between 3.36 and 3.81, so if he's able to walk less batters, that's going to lead to better results when it comes to the ERA. I really feel like David Peterson is a big, big X factor in this rotation. I think there is a world where you get a healthy Verlander and Scherzer, and then you get Senga as this breakout Rookie of the Year type star, and Peterson solidifying that rotation, giving you 4 viable arms that you eventually can trust come October, where he might go up this year and pitch to a similar ERA to what he had in 2020 in that shortened season of only 49 and 2/3 innings, and pitch to like a 3.3, 3.4 ERA while striking out 10.5 batters per 9, cutting the walks a little bit, and just being an overall extremely effective pitcher that can maybe go out this year and give you 150 innings. I don't see any reason why David Peterson can't go up this year and make 25 to 30 starts. I think with Quintana's injury clearing the way, knowing how these things work where other injuries can happen, even if Quintana is coming back in July now, I think by that point in the season, David Peterson at 27 years old is going to outpitch Carlos Carrasco in his mid-30s, and it'll either be Carrasco being bumped for Quintana or some type of a piggyback situation with those guys, and the veterans will be solidifying the back end of the rotation, and Peterson is going to find himself no lower than being the number 4 starter on this team. I believed in him all off season. I'm not moving off that, and that's why there's part of me that looks at this injury, and it's too far to call it a blessing in disguise because you can't lose depth and be happy about it. But I think as it simply relates to Peterson, it's a blessing because this is a guy that I believe is due for a breakout. And if you look beyond this season at what the Mets have when it comes to their rotation, I mean, Carrasco, this is the last year of control. Quintana's a year beyond this. Senga, you have him for 3 years with an opt-out, potentially 5. You still have Verlander and Scherzer potentially for 1 more year apiece if Scherzer picks up his option. Or doesn't opt out essentially. Verlander will definitely be under contract next year and has the vesting option to be under contract for a 3rd year. David Peterson, at this point, will not be a free agent until 2027. So that means you have him under control for 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026. 4 more years of control for Peterson. Outside of Senga, he's the most controllable starter in this rotation that I believe will continue to be a starter for the foreseeable future. Tylor Megill is a guy that I like and they have control of, but he has to prove a lot more than Peterson, who just went out and did it, and just did it over a representative sample, and is at an age and with a pedigree as the 1st-round pick where I can just bet on some, continual growth over the coming years, because I just think he projects out as a high floor starter. I really believe that to be the case. I thought that was kind of always the book on him, that he would be a high floor back end starter. And I think the way he has improved the strikeouts has maybe given him a little more upside to dream on than maybe we anticipated when he made his debut a couple of years ago. But now McGill slides into that sixth spot, which makes him much more valuable to this team. Where is he going to begin this season? What are the projection models saying about him? Could he be a bounce back candidate? We're going to get to all of that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. With David Peterson set to fill the vacated spot in the Mets rotation left by Jose Quintana, now Tylor Megill is expected to fill that sixth spot in the rotation, where the Mets could either go to that six-man staff and they can have Megill out there for a little bit and give some more rest to guys like Senga, who is adjusting to Major League Baseball for the first time, and Verlander and Scherzer, who are getting up there in age, or he can be a swingman, giving them length out of the pen. He could be in AAA Syracuse, just waiting in the wings whenever the Mets need a starter to fill in for either a spot starter due to injury. McGill's going to get more run now that Quintana's out. It's that simple. The question is how much run and how effective can he be? I think Tylor Megill is probably overrated by some Mets fans because his peaks have been remarkable. 2021, right when he's getting his feet wet, he has a 1.04 ERA in 5 starts in July across 26 innings pitched. Looks completely dynamic. He's getting comparisons to Jacob deGrom because his fastball played up in a similar way as deGrom's did when he was a rookie. And everyone just thought, oh my God, here's this guy that came out of nowhere, was called up due to necessity, and then thrived. Could this be the next deGrom? The rest of that year, though, after July, he wasn't good. 6.44 ERA in August, 5.76 ERA in September and October to close out the year. Just dreadful. 4.77 ERA and 71 2/3 pitched in the second half. I mean, the guy just wasn't very good. Now, you look at what he did in 2022, and there was another month where he was excellent early in the year where he was, again, filling in for Jacob deGrom and looking like him with a 1.93 ERA to start the year and being part of a combined no-hitter, pitching the most innings out of any pitcher in that game, obviously, as the starter. You look at what he did beyond that, though, it was all injuries. I mean, he never pitched more than 6 2/3 in a month for the remainder of the year. It was 6 2/3 in May, 6 2/3 in June, didn't pitch at all in July, then 6 innings out of the pen in September and October. He just really battled injuries, and that caused ineffectiveness as he pitched to a 14.5 ERA in May, 8.10 in June, 6 in September and October. He just wasn't the same guy. So obviously he's not the 1.93 ERA guy, but you look at his first 2 seasons, it's a 5.13 ERA in 2022 and a 4.52 ERA in 2021. Is he a 4.5 ERA guy? And if he is, how effective is he really? This is a guy that didn't have a ton of run in the minor leagues, was really just working fastball in AA in 2021, gets to AAA and starts to really toy with the slider and the changeup, gets called up and has to continue to toy with it, and he's learning those pitches kind of on the fly at the big league level where they weren't polished, and he had a lot of success. But when those pitches evade him, they escape him, when he can't find the strike zone with them, when they aren't convincing enough for batters and they can just spit on them, or even worse, if he hangs them over the heart of the plate and guys can do damage on them, suddenly he's a far less successful pitcher. Because while Tylor Megill has a great fastball and gets great extension that allows that fastball to jump on batters, you can't be a one-pitch guy, particularly coming from the rotation. That's why a lot of us thought that he would play up a bit coming out of the bullpen, and he didn't. So that leaves you in an interesting spot where the Mets might be inclined to put him on the MLB team, but they also might be concerned about him being able to fill in that role that is so difficult to start some games, to come out of the pen. Trevor Williams did amazing of it last year. Maybe you need someone with more MLB experience. Maybe a Joey Lucchesi now has a better chance of making the team. Or I don't even know about making the team, but at some point being part of the bullpen, whether it's Lucchesi or Jose Butto, compared to Megill, where maybe the Mets decide, let's just park him in Syracuse. This is a guy that has never really had a ton of minor league experience anyway. It's a growing opportunity for him at 27 years old to pitch his way out of it. If he's incredible down there, at some point the Mets are going to have to call on him. And if he's ready to go when the Mets need him, I still think Tylor Megill can have that breakout season that we've all been anticipating. I just look at the floor of a David Peterson compared to the floor of a Tylor Megill. And to me, there's no question who should be in the starting rotation come opening day. We look at the projection models, though. Let's just close out the show on that as we preview the season for every key Met. We've done it for some position players, and we've done it with some of the pitchers. We just did it with Peterson. Looking at the models for Megill, you do have a lot of strikeouts being projected between 9.47 and 10.04. The models have him pitching between 57 and 64 innings for most of them. Zips, which doesn't factor in depth chart, has him at 81.7, making 16 starts. If he were to be that frequently used, a 3.97 ERA is what they're projecting. That's not bad. Yet, you look at the other projection models, it's between 3.72 and 4. The best model has him at 3.49. To see so many models projecting him in the high 3s, low 4s, that is a quality pitcher for the role that he's going to serve. But it's just a question of how well can he function in that role, whether it being the long man who has to get some starts throughout the week, or if it is starting in AAA and just at some point knowing there's going to be an injury, having to be called on to be part of the rotation for a month here and there. I think Megill can do it. I think Peterson's going to fill in great for Quintana, and ultimately I think the Mets have plenty of depth to be okay sustaining this injury, and even if there are further injuries throughout the year, I think they'll be fine. But it's going to hinge a lot on what Peterson and Megill can do. These are guys that they always want to go into the season, having them on the outside looking into the rotation, because if you do that, that means you have the depth to deal with injuries. And these are guys that if they can find a way to establish themselves, they can be big parts of this core moving forward. Megill, he had an even additional year of control compared to Peterson. He's not going to be a free agent until 2028. So we're not even ARB eligible until 2025. So 2 years of him cheap before you have to pay for 3 ARB years. He's going to be a bargain for Steve Cohen over the next couple of seasons. If he can establish himself in one day, you can go into the offseason instead of saying, yeah, we need Peterson and Megill to be 6 and 7 on our depth chart. If they can say, you know what, we feel great and feel confident with them at 4 and 5, that's going to be a big success to this organization that just hasn't developed pitchers that well over recent years. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball, where you can win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.